Welcome to Honeybee. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. Real stories of love, lies, and betrayal, where every truth stings. Let's begin. The afternoon sun hung lazily in the sky, painting everything in warm shades of gold. The air was thick with the smoky scent of grilled meat, laughter, and the familiar chaos that always came with family gatherings. My wife, Lily, had spent the whole week planning this barbecue, making lists, preparing marinades, and ensuring every little detail was perfect. She thrived in these social moments, surrounded by people, the center of every conversation. I, on the other hand, preferred to stay in the background. I wasn't antisocial. I just wasn't loud. My world was quieter, made up of work, small talk, and an occasional beer by the porch. I was content letting Lily shine while I stayed in the shadows, flipping burgers and smiling politely when needed. By late afternoon, our backyard was full. Her parents sat under the umbrella, laughing about old memories. Kids ran around chasing bubbles, and Lily's sister Amanda was sipping wine like it was water. Amanda had always been sharp, not just in looks but in words, the kind of person who could make you laugh and feel small in the same breath. As the laughter grew louder and the drinks flowed freely, I noticed Lily glancing my way from time to time, a quick look that said, "Smile more, blend in." I tried, but small talk wasn't my thing. I found myself standing near the grill, quietly flipping chicken while Amanda approached, holding her glass with that mischievous smirk she always carried. "You know, you should really learn to loosen up," she said, her tone playful but edged. "You look like you're guarding the food instead of cooking it." I chuckled softly, pretending not to mind. Someone's got to make sure it doesn't burn. She laughed, a little too loud. "Oh, please. Even if it did, no one would notice. You could disappear tomorrow, and I bet half of us wouldn't even realize until the next barbecue." Her words sliced through the air like a blade wrapped in humor. A few people chuckled, thinking it was just a joke, but something inside me froze. I looked around. Lily laughed too, though it was that awkward laugh people use when they don't know what else to do. For a moment, I just stood there, spatula in hand, my smile stiff and my stomach twisting. I told myself not to react, not to make a scene. It was just a joke, right? But the laughter felt heavier than it should have, and I felt myself shrinking in front of everyone. I turned back to the grill, flipping another piece of chicken that didn't need flipping. My face burned, not from the heat, but from humiliation. The conversations continued around me, everyone moving on, but I couldn't. Those words dug in deep. If you disappeared tomorrow, no one would even notice. That night, after everyone had left, I helped Lily clean up. Empty bottles clinked as we tossed them into the bin. She looked exhausted but happy, humming softly as she wiped the table. I wanted to tell her how that comment had made me feel, how it lingered in my head like smoke that wouldn't fade. But when I opened my mouth, nothing came out. Instead, I just said, "Everyone seemed to have a good time." She smiled, not catching the weight behind my tone. "Yeah, it went great. Even Amanda behaved herself for once." I forced a smile. Behaved. That word hit me wrong. If that was her version of behaving, I didn't want to know what her worst looked like. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling while Lily drifted off beside me. The room was dark, silent except for her soft breathing. My mind replayed Amanda's words again and again. I wondered if there was some truth hidden in her cruelty. Would anyone really notice if I disappeared? It wasn't self-pity. It was more of a realization. Somewhere along the way, I had become invisible in my own life. The next morning, Lily acted like everything was fine. She chatted over coffee, planned her errands, and mentioned Amanda's new boyfriend. I nodded and smiled, but my thoughts were elsewhere. I couldn't shake that hollow feeling. It was as if something had cracked open inside me, something I didn't even know was fragile. Over the next few days, I found myself withdrawing even more. At work, I kept my head down. At home, I stayed quiet. Lily didn't seem to notice, or maybe she didn't want to. We had fallen into this rhythm where silence was easier than honesty. One evening, I came home to find Amanda sitting in our living room again. She dropped by just to visit. Her smirk returned the moment she saw me. "Hey there, barbecue man," she said teasingly. Still alive, I see. Lily laughed again, like it was harmless fun, but I caught the subtle mockery in Amanda's tone. It wasn't just a joke to her. It was a way of reminding me that I didn't quite belong. I kept my voice steady. Still here, still cooking. Good, she said, sipping her wine. Wouldn't want the grill master disappearing on us. Who else would stand there all day looking miserable? The word stung again, but this time something inside me shifted. I didn't smile. I didn't laugh. I just looked her in the eye until she looked away. That moment was small, but it mattered. It was the first time I didn't let her define how I felt. Later that night, Lily noticed my silence and asked, "Are you okay? You've been quiet lately." I hesitated before replying. "Do you ever think about how people see us? About how they talk to us?" She frowned slightly, confused. "What do you mean?" "Your sister said something the other day. It bothered me." Lily sighed, brushing it off. "Oh, come on. Amanda jokes about everything. Don't take it seriously." I wanted to say that I wasn't overreacting, that it wasn't the joke itself but the truth behind it that hurt. But I let it go again like always. I was tired of being the only one who noticed. That night, as I stood by the window, watching quiet street outside, I realized something. I had spent so long trying not to make waves that I'd let people drift right over me. Amanda's words weren't just cruel. They were a reflection of how everyone had come to see me. Quiet, harmless, unnoticed, and maybe, just maybe, that was my fault too. Days turned into weeks after that barbecue, but the memory of Amanda's words stayed with me like a bruise that refused to fade. I tried to ignore it, telling myself I was being too sensitive, but something in me had shifted. The world looked the same, my house, my job, my wife. But I felt detached from it all, like I was watching my own life from a distance. At work, I buried myself in tasks, taking on extra hours just to stay away from the noise of home. My colleagues joked that I was becoming a machine, but at least machines didn't have to pretend. The silence in my head was easier to manage than the hollow laughter that awaited me every evening. Lily didn't seem to notice the growing space between us. She filled her days with phone calls, errands, and social plans. Amanda was over more often now, helping her with some charity project. I would walk in after long hours, see them sitting together on the couch, and feel like an outsider in my own living room. One evening, I came home later than usual. The house smelled like wine and expensive perfume. They were laughing, that carefree laughter that used to make me smile. But as soon as I stepped in, the sound dimmed slightly. Amanda greeted me with that familiar smirk. "Well, if it isn't the invisible man himself. We were starting to think you really had disappeared." Lily giggled, though she shot me an apologetic glance. I gave a polite smile, hung up my jacket, and walked past them. I didn't trust my voice to say anything that wouldn't sound bitter. As I closed the kitchen door behind me, I heard Amanda's whisper, low but sharp enough to pierce through. "He's always so serious. I don't know how you stand it." Lily's reply was softer, almost offensive. "He's not always like that. He's just quiet." "Quiet or boring?" Amanda said, her tone laced with cruel amusement. The words hit harder than they should have. I clenched my jaw, pretending not to care, but a heavy ache pressed against my chest. I stayed in the kitchen for a long time, pretending to look for something in the fridge. That night, I ate dinner alone long after they'd gone to bed. Something broke in me that night, not in anger, but in exhaustion. I realized I couldn't keep living like a ghost in my own home. The next day, during my lunch break, I sat in the park near my office and thought about my life. When had I stopped living for myself? When had I become someone so easy to overlook? I used to have dreams, plans to start my own business, travel, right? Maybe even teach. But over time, I'd buried all of that under routine, believing that being steady and reliable was enough. I thought love was about being constant. I didn't realize that being constant also meant being taken for granted. That night, I came home earlier than usual. Lily looked surprised. "You're home already?" "Yeah," I said quietly. "I was thinking maybe we could have dinner together. Just us." Her smile faded a little. "Oh, Amanda's coming over again. We're finishing up the charity stuff. Of course she was. I nodded slowly. Sure, maybe another time. Amanda arrived an hour later, her laughter filling the house before she even stepped inside. I excused myself, saying I was tired. I could feel Amanda's mocking eyes on my back as I walked upstairs. But instead of going to bed, I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. For the first time in years, I began writing again, not for work, not for anyone else, but for myself. Words poured out of me, raw and unfiltered. I wrote about loneliness, about invisibility, about the quiet ache of being unappreciated. It wasn't revenge I was looking for. It was rediscovery. Night after night, I kept writing. I found solace in it, a voice that I had long forgotten I possessed. I didn't tell Lily. I didn't tell anyone. It became my secret rebellion, my way of existing again. Weeks later, something unexpected happened. A colleague read one of my short pieces, something I casually shared during lunch, and insisted I submit it to a local magazine. I hesitated, but eventually I did. A month after that, I received an email. They wanted to publish it. When I read that message, I just sat there in silence. It wasn't about fame or recognition. It was a validation that I still mattered, that I hadn't completely disappeared. That evening, I told Lily during dinner, "A magazine wants to publish one of my stories." Her eyes widened. "Really? That's amazing. I didn't even know you were writing again." I smiled faintly. "Yeah, I just started recently." Amanda, who was there again, as usual, raised an eyebrow. "Wow! Didn't think you had that kind of creativity in you. Congrats." Her voice carried that same patronizing tone, but this time it didn't sting, because for the first time, her words didn't define me. A few weeks later, the magazine arrived in the mail with my story printed inside. It was strange, holding something I had created, proof that I still existed beyond other people's shadows. One evening, when the whole family came over again, including Amanda, I placed the magazine on the coffee table without a word. It wasn't meant to show off. I just wanted it there. Amanda noticed it first. "Hey, is this yours?" she asked, picking it up. Lily smiled proudly. "Yes, that's my husband's story. It got published." Amanda flipped through the pages, reading a few lines. Her expression softened, just slightly. "Not bad," she said quietly. "Didn't think you had it in you." Her voice lacked the usual venom. It was the closest thing to respect I had ever heard from her. Later that night, as the guests left, Lily turned to me and said, "You know, I'm really proud of you. I didn't realize how much you've been keeping to yourself." I looked at her for a long moment. "You didn't notice because I stopped trying to be noticed." She looked guilty. "I'm sorry. I should have paid more attention. I didn't realize Amanda's jokes bothered you so much." "It wasn't just her," I said softly. "It was everyone, even me. I stopped seeing my own worth." She reached across the table and took my hand. "You don't have to disappear anymore. I see you now." Her words weren't perfect, but they were honest. Over the next few months, things changed between us. Slowly, quietly, but genuinely. Lily made an effort to understand me, to ask questions, to listen. And I learned to speak up, to draw boundaries, to stop letting people walk over my silence. Amanda still came around, but the tone had changed. She was cautious now, maybe even respectful. The last time she visited, she handed me a book. "You might like this," she said. "It's about a writer who starts over." It was her way of apologizing without saying the words. I accepted it with a small smile. Sometimes, late at night, I still think about that barbecue, about that single cruel joke that started it all. At first, it felt like a wound. But in hindsight, it became a mirror. Amanda's words had forced me to confront a truth I had ignored for years. I didn't disappear. I rediscovered myself. And maybe that was the best kind of revenge. Not anger, not bitterness, but growth. The next time the family gathered again for another barbecue, the air was filled with the same laughter and chatter. But this time, I didn't stay behind the grill. I joined the conversations, laughed freely, and told a few jokes of my own. At one point, Amanda raised her glass and said with a grin, "Here's to the man who proved us all wrong." The crowd laughed, but this time it was warm, not cruel. I smiled back and clinked my glass with hers. "Glad you finally noticed I'm still here." The laughter that followed was genuine, echoing to the yard like music. For the first time in a long while, I felt present, not as a shadow, not as a background figure, but as myself. And in that moment, under the glow of the setting sun, I realized something simple yet powerful. Sometimes it takes being underestimated to remember how much strength you really have, because disappearing isn't the same as being forgotten. Sometimes it's just the beginning of being found.